Okay, memory anxiety. So how anxiety affects our memory, and in this case, eyewitness testimony is the way it's shown. So anxiety, eyewitness testimony. Okay, the first point is to make sure that you both know it has a positive and a negative effect. All right, and you're going to know a study or two for why it's shown to have a negative effect, and a study or two to show why it's had a positive effect. And you'll understand this idea of the Yerkes-Dodson law. All right, there are three things that we're going to make sure you understand. All area one. Okay, the effects of anxiety. Anxiety has strong emotional and physical effects. It's not clear whether these effects make eyewitness recall better or worse. Probably already got that, and you'll see. Anxiety can have a negative effect on recall. Anxiety creates physiological arousal in the body, which prevents us paying attention to important cues. So when we're over anxious, when we're over aroused, maybe we're missing, what we're saying is that we might miss the colour of the car, we might miss because we're stressed, anxious. The idea of the weapons on anxiety is one way in which they've proven it, okay, the effect of weapons, and we'll look at that in the study. Johnson and Scott, they led participants to believe they were taking part in a lab study. They were sat in a room, waiting room, and they could hear an argument in the next room. So imagine there's 10 of you in a waiting room, you hear an argument in the other room, out the back, blah, 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 and then they're looking at the two conditions. There were two conditions, low anxiety, high anxiety. In the low anxiety condition, a man walked through the waiting room carrying a pen with grease on his hands. So, okay, a little bit of an argument outside, but you know, person comes in, pen, grease on their hands. Do we think that we would remember that person or not? We're thinking about how high or low the anxiety is. Low condition. Another group, so this is the high condition group, heard the same argument, but this time with the sound of breaking glass. So they're saying that breaking glass is going to increase anxiety. A man walked out of the room with a paper knife covered in blood. Okay, they wouldn't necessarily know it's a paper knife, so the people in the waiting room are thinking, oh my God, there's been an argument, there's been a clash of glass or a smash of glass, and here is somebody walking through the room with a paper knife covered in blood. This was the high anxiety group. So do we think the high anxiety or the low anxiety are going to perform better? Okay, the participants had to pick the man out of a set of 50 photos. So once the experiment was over, they would go in and they would get 50 photos of various people. One of those people were the correct man. Okay, and 49% identified the man with the pen correctly, 33%. So we're saying that the low anxiety performed better here. So high anxiety appears to reduce eyewitness testimony. So this is saying that anxiety has a negative effect on eyewitness testimony. The idea behind this tunnel theory suggests that we were focusing on the weapon. When the person came into the room with the knife, we look at the knife, we're looking at the knife and the blood, and we don't actually look at their face. That's called weapon focus. Okay, so anxiety can also have a positive effect on recall. The fight or flight response caused when our body experiences a stressor such as a violent incident. The response increases our alertness and improves our memory. So if you've ever been in an environment that got aggressive or something like that, you definitely become more alert. Some people describe it as everything slowed down and they could remember a lot more. So this increases our alertness, improves our memories for the event because we become more aware of the cues. Euler and Kutzel, 1986, conducted a study of a real-life shooting. So real life is important. The one before was a lab study. So when we look at evaluating studies, make sure you understand that. In a gun shop in Vancouver, the shop owner shot a thief dead. Okay, there were 21 witnesses, 13 agreed to take part in the study. 4 to 5 months later, they attended an interview and rated how stressed they were at the time. Okay, so they've got real life shooting, 13 people taking part. It's a longitudinal study, so it's being done 4 or 5 months later, how stressed they were at the time. The witnesses were very accurate in their accounts. There was very little change in the amount of accuracy after 5 months. Those who reported the highest levels of stress were more accurate. So this is completely disagreeing with the paper knife study. Okay, this is saying that they've seen a shooting, they've seen someone die. This is high anxiety within this shop, okay, and they're saying that very little changed in the amount of accuracy, so the accuracy was still really good 5 months later, and that those which were recorded the highest amount of stress, so yes, I was a 9 out of 10, I was right next to it, you know, some blood squirted on me or whatever, they were actually the most accurate. So this shows the positive effects of anxiety. Yerkes-Dodson, we mentioned at the start, and this is the relationship. You need to just draw this out, please. Suggests that the relationship between emotional arousal and performance looks like an inverted U. So you can, hopefully it makes sense to you, kind of you know, B or C at maths, and you should be able to understand what's going on here. That we're saying down at the low end, weak and low corner, that might be what in a lab watching a car crash on TV, which we recreated the Loftus and Palmer. Our arousal is going to be very low. Maybe you're looking at your phone, you don't care, so our performance is low. At the other end, right on the far right, on the high, okay, you would say here this could be, you know, a family member in a crime. There's a weapon. There's blood, you know, awful things like that, which would make our anxiety, our arousal really high, and then we would completely forget everything, and you know, we'd focus on the wrong cues. So that's there, and then we've got this idea of this optimum shape. So at some point, our arousal is at its perfect, its optimum. Okay, and that means that we're going to remember the most. It's going to be very good. So the Yerkes-Dodson law explains why we might have positives and negatives. All right, we're going to look at AO3 next.